In the heart of the Low Country, where beauty hides decay and silence remembers every scream, the Tain Plantation stands, a monument built on secrets, lies, and blood. But tonight, the past will no longer stay buried. The Tain Plantation stood like a shining white jewel against the deep green landscape of South Carolina's Low Country. Its tall white columns reached toward the sky as if in prayer, though no amount of devotion could ever wash away the darkness buried inside its walls. In the summer of 1836, the estate was admired across Charleston as a model of wealth and order. Its rice fields yielded rich harvests, its horses were the envy of neighboring planters, and its mistress, Ella Lanena Tain, was praised for maintaining such prosperity despite being a widow. Ella Lanena had buried her husband, Colonel William Tain, 3 winters before. Most widows might have collapsed under the weight of running such a vast estate, but not her. Instead, she thrived. Under her firm direction, the plantation's profits rose even higher, a fact that left many of Charleston's elite puzzled and impressed. "Mrs. Tain, you continue to astonish us," Judge Hale remarked one humid evening during a summer soiree on the veranda. "Your cotton yield has surpassed even the Pinckney plantation this year." Eleanor, now 45, once beautiful but hardened by time and ambition, smiled with quiet restraint. "God helps those who help themselves, Judge Hale," she replied softly. What society did not see, however, was how Ella Lanena truly helped herself. Behind the grand facade of the mansion, beyond the trimmed gardens where her 3 daughters entertained suitors, stood another building, hidden by a grove of massive live oaks. The slaves called it the breeding house, though never when a white person could hear. That night, after the last guest had departed and twilight cloaked the plantation, Lanena retired to her study. Ledgers lay open on a polished mahogany desk, numbers lined neatly in her tidy handwriting. Silas Webb, the overseer, a large, rough man with weathered hands, waited by the door, hat pressed to his chest. "The new girl from the Dalton auction arrived this afternoon," he said. "Strong, healthy, should bring in a fine price for her first child." Ella Lanena nodded, eyes never leaving the ledger. "Have Dr. Parnell examine her tomorrow. I won't pay extra if she's barren." Her quill scratched across the page with steady precision. "And what of Mercy's child, born this morning?" "A healthy boy," Webb replied. "Perfect size." A thin, cold smile touched Ella Lanena's lips. "Excellent. That makes 3 this month. The Georgia traders will be satisfied." What went unspoken was that Mercy was no slave by birth. She was her daughter's personal maid, only 16, impregnated under her mistress's orders. The baby would be registered as a slave, his mother's identity erased. In the East Wing, Ella Lanena's 3 daughters, Caroline, Josephine, and Beatrice, were preparing for bed, each holding secrets of her own, secrets that would soon collide into something terrible. Caroline, 22, stood by her window, staring toward the slave quarters, her hand resting unconsciously on her stomach. Josephine, 20, sat at her writing desk, filling page after page in a journal she kept hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Beatrice, just 17, wept quietly into her pillow, terrified of her mother's plans for her 18th birthday. Outside, in the shadow of the oak grove, a newly arrived house slave named Isaiah watched the grand house from afar. His sister had vanished into Ella Lanena's program 3 months earlier, and Isaiah had arranged to be sold here deliberately, to uncover the truth and, if possible, to rescue her. The cicadas screamed through the humid night as a storm brewed far off on the horizon. By morning, rain would fall across Tain Plantation, but it would be nothing compared to the flood of secrets waiting to be exposed. Isaiah's first morning began before dawn. His body still ached from the journey south from Virginia. He had been purchased with 5 other men at the Charleston market, chosen for strength and endurance. As he scrubbed the marble floor of the entry hall under the stern eyes of Agatha, the head house slave, he listened carefully for any mention of his sister. "Keep your head down and your ears open in this house," Agatha whispered as she passed, her voice low. "Curiosity here can cost your life." Isaiah gave a slight nod and continued working. Above him, the household was already awake. He could hear the footsteps of the daughters moving between rooms, the sharp tone of Ella Lenina giving orders, and the hurried responses of servants obeying her. By mid-morning, he was reassigned to the stables, where he met Jonas, an older slave who had worked there nearly 30 years. The man's hollow eyes carried the weight of unspeakable memories. "You're new," Jonas muttered as they cleaned stalls. "Where'd they pull you from?" "Virginia," Isaiah replied carefully. "Hanover County." Jonas nodded, eyes shifting to check for overseers. "You got a reason for being here? Most men brought lately do." Before Isaiah could answer, Silas Webb appeared, boots muddy from the morning rain. Both men immediately bent to their work. "You," Webb barked, pointing at Isaiah. "Mrs. Taine wants the new stock examined. Take this message to Dr. Parnell in town." He handed him a sealed envelope. The errand felt like luck, a rare chance to leave the plantation gates. Isaiah took it, hoping he might gather clues about his sister or the property's layout. The walk to Charleston took nearly an hour. Dr. Parnell's office stood near the harbor, its brass nameplate gleaming in the sun. Isaiah delivered the envelope to a pale assistant who said curtly, "Wait here," before disappearing inside. For a few precious minutes, Isaiah was alone. He watched people passing by and overheard two white men speaking nearby. "Taine's widow is sending another dozen next week," one said, checking his pocket watch. "Fine stock, even if they're a bit young. The market's hungry." "The Taine breeding program's the most efficient in the state," replied the other. Isaiah's heart pounded. His worst suspicions were true. The plantation bred slaves for sale, a cruel practice that had only grown after the international slave trade was outlawed. His sister could indeed be trapped there, forced to bear children only to have them taken away. The assistant returned with a new envelope. "For Mrs. Taine only," he said. Isaiah nodded and began the long walk back. This time, he took a different path, skirting the back of the estate. Beyond the main house and kitchen gardens, he spotted the hidden building again. Unlike the slave cabins, it had glass windows, though they were covered with heavy drapes. A white woman, not a slave, entered carrying what looked like medical supplies. That night, after the others had gone to sleep, Isaiah slipped away to meet Phyllis, an elderly cook who had shown him kindness. Behind the smokehouse, the smell of salted meat hiding their voices, he whispered, "My sister, Ruth. She was brought here 3 months ago." Phyllis's tired face filled with sorrow. "That building you saw, they call it the Infirmary for Polite Ears. That's where they keep the breeding women. Is she there?" Isaiah's voice cracked. Phyllis nodded slowly. "Yes, but don't do anything foolish, boy. No one ever leaves that place. Mrs. Taine has the law, the church, and the gun on her side." "The daughters?" he asked. Phyllis hesitated. "Caroline, the oldest, she's just like her mother. Josephine writes things down, dangerous things. And Beatrice, the youngest, she's next. When she turns 18, the mistress has plans for her too." Phyllis stiffened suddenly. "Someone's coming. Go." Isaiah slipped into the darkness as a watchman's lantern swayed nearby. Sleep never came that night. Phyllis's warning echoed in his mind. The Taine plantation was worse than he had imagined, a place of horror wrapped in wealth and false grace. Upstairs, Josephine Taine lifted the floorboard beneath her bed with trembling hands. The house was quiet. Her mother worked late in the study. Caroline was downstairs entertaining a guest. Beatrice had cried herself to sleep again after another argument about her duty to the family. Josephine took out her small leather-bound journal and an inkwell. What had started 2 years ago as simple notes about the plantation's operations had become her only act of rebellion and her only confession. August 17th, 1836. Another girl taken to the infirmary today. Her name, Ruth. 17 women are kept there now. Mother has ordered special rations for them, fresh meat, molasses, things denied to the others. Dr. Parnell visits twice a week. Josephine paused. The truth she had uncovered haunted her. Her father's death had not been natural. Hidden in her mother's secret ledger, separate from the official accounts, she had found records of a plan 20 years in the making. Women selected for breeding, pregnancies recorded, results measured. Her own sisters' names were listed. Caroline inducted at 18 as overseer of maternal health. Beatrice scheduled for her first term at 18. A knock at the door startled her. She quickly replaced the board. Yes. Esther, a house servant, entered with eyes lowered. Miss Caroline asks for you in the parlor. Mr. Blackwood and his brother have come. I'll be down shortly, Josephine said, steadying herself. The visits were never social. Her mother arranged them, weighing potential husbands for wealth and bloodline. The Blackwoods were rich, powerful, and respected. If her mother approved, Josephine would be expected to play her part, no matter how sick it made her feel. Downstairs, the parlor glowed with candlelight. Caroline sat gracefully, laughing at Thomas Blackwood's jokes. Beside him stood his brother, Lieutenant James Blackwood, newly returned from military duty. Tall, with sharp eyes and a soldier's posture, he bowed politely. Miss Taine, he said, your sister speaks highly of you. Caroline is too kind, Josephine answered, forcing a small smile. I hear you've seen the frontier, Lieutenant. It must be quite a world. As he described his travels, Josephine noticed Isaiah enter quietly with a tray of refreshments. Their eyes met briefly, a moment quick as breath, but it was enough. Something in his gaze told her he carried a secret, and she suddenly felt that her own might soon find its way to the light. The evening conversation moved in its usual polite rhythm until Elelena Tyne entered the room. Her arrival seemed effortless, but nothing about her was ever accidental. Every detail of the night had been arranged by her hand. She looked at Lieutenant Blackwood with the same calm precision she used when examining livestock. Lieutenant, she said, her voice pleasant, but her eyes distant. What a pleasure to have you join us tonight. I hear your family's plantation borders our southern fields. Perhaps tomorrow you might like to tour the Taine estate. We've developed some new techniques that may interest a young man with a modern mind. Josephine felt a chill run through her. Her mother never invited strangers to inspect the plantation unless there was a deeper reason. What purpose did this soldier serve in her mother's plans? Later that night, Josephine sat by candlelight, writing in her journal. Mother seems unusually interested in Littleton James Blackwood. He is to tour the plantation tomorrow, though I doubt the infirmary will be shown. Caroline already knows of this. Beatrice's birthday approaches too fast. Whatever Mother is planning, I must find a way to stop it. Perhaps Isaiah, the new house slave, can help. There's something about him. He's not what he seems. Thunder rolled in the distance as a summer storm gathered. Josephine couldn't shake the feeling that the coming storm was a warning of what was about to unfold. Dr. Maxwell Parnell worked with the precision of a man who prized order above all. His tools were spotless, his records exact, his tone cold and professional. For 10 years, he had served under Elelena Tyne, tending to what the slaves called the breeding house, though officially it was labeled the infirmary. He treated his work as science, not sin. The infirmary held 12 rooms. Each one housed 1 or 2 women, depending on how far along they were in pregnancy or recovery. 16 women were kept there at the time, 3 nearing birth and 4 who had delivered within the past 2 weeks. Subject 23 is recovering well, Parnell said to Nurse Hammond, a stern woman once dismissed from a Boston hospital before finding employment under Mrs. Taine. Milk supply strong, infant weight normal. Subject 23, whose name was Ruth, sat by a small window, rocking her 10-day-old baby. Her eyes were dull, her spirit broken by months of captivity, and by the knowledge that her child would soon be taken from her to be sold. Continue observations for subjects 17 through 22, Parnell ordered. Discontinue for 23 once the infant is weaned. Mrs. Taine wants her ready for the next cycle by November, Nurse Hammond replied. Their detached talk ended with a knock at the main door. The nurse returned with a sealed letter. Mrs. Taine requests your presence at dinner this evening, she said. She's entertaining the Blackwood brothers and wishes to discuss their bloodlines. Dr. Parnell simply nodded. These dinners were never mere social events. Elena used them to assess possible husbands for her daughters, choosing them not by affection, but by traits that might strengthen her family's line. The doctor no longer thought about right or wrong. The pay was good, and the work, dark as it was, fed his professional curiosity. Later that night, he paused outside a locked door at the end of the hall. Unlike the others, this one had no window. Only he and Mrs. Taine had the keys. Inside were shelves lined with glass jars, failures of her breeding experiments, misshapen infants, stillbirths, twisted fusions of lives never meant to exist. Mrs. Taine insisted on keeping them for study. Some, the doctor knew, came from her own family's blood. Outside, Isaiah worked quietly in the garden, close enough to overhear the distant voices from the veranda. He could make out Mrs. Taine's smooth tones as she guided Lieutenant Blackwood through her fields. "Your irrigation methods are remarkable, Mrs. Taine," Blackwood said politely. "Necessity breeds invention, Lieutenant," she replied. "When my husband passed, most believed I would fail, but I was determined to prove them wrong." "You've succeeded," he said. "Your crops are the envy of the region." Her smile was sharp and knowing. "You haven't yet seen our most profitable division. Perhaps after dinner, if you're curious. It involves animal husbandry." Isaiah froze where he worked. He knew what that phrase meant. The breeding house. Was she truly going to show that place to a military officer? At dinner, Isaiah watched from the shadows. Caroline was seated beside Thomas Blackwood, her laughter practiced and charming. Josephine dined with James, but her smile was tight and her replies short. Beatrice, the youngest, barely touched her food, flinching whenever spoken to. "I understand your family values selective breeding," Mrs. Taine said over dessert. "Your father's horses are said to be the finest in South Carolina." "Yes, ma'am," James answered politely. "Though credit belongs to our stable master, I've been away too long to take much part." "Still," she said smoothly, "you understand the importance of maintaining strong bloodlines. After dinner, I'll show you a project few outsiders have ever seen." Isaiah nearly dropped the serving tray he held. He had to warn Phyllis, and Josephine too. The tour would almost certainly lead to the infirmary, where his sister Ruth was held. When he found Phyllis in the kitchen, he spoke quickly. "She's showing him the breeding house tonight." Phyllis's eyes widened in fear. "Then she plans to bring him into it. No one sees that place unless they're part of her scheme." "I have to go there," Isaiah said. "You'll die if you do," she whispered, trembling. "And she'll kill Ruth, too." Still, she slipped him a small key. "The back door of the wash house connects to the infirmary through the old tunnel. But if you're caught, we all pay the price." Outside, the storm broke at last, wind howling, rain hammering the earth. Isaiah knew this might be his only chance. Upstairs, Beatrice stood before her mirror, pale and hollow-eyed. In less than 6 weeks, she would turn 18, and her mother had already begun preparing her for family duty. New gowns, careful diets, constant visits from Dr. Parnell. A soft knock broke her thoughts. Josephine slipped inside. "We need to talk," she whispered, "about Mother's plans for you." Beatrice's hand shook. "I can't, Josie. I don't want to think about it." "You must," Josephine said, sitting beside her. "What happened to Caroline? It's all part of something terrible. Mother isn't just breeding slaves, Bee. She's—" "I know," Beatrice interrupted in a broken voice. "Caroline told me it's our duty. Father began it before I was born." Josephine's blood ran cold. "She said that? That Father started it?" Beatrice nodded miserably. "He wanted to create a stronger bloodline. Mother says we're continuing his work." "It's monstrous," Josephine whispered fiercely, "and I won't let her do the same to you." Lightning flashed, throwing their faces into sharp relief. Josephine reached inside her dress and pulled out her hidden journal. "I've written everything down. Mother's notes, Parnell's visits, what happens in the infirmary. And now she's bringing Lieutenant Blackwood into it." "Why him?" Beatrice frowned. "What does he have to do with this?" "I don't know," Josephine said, "but she never shows outsiders the breeding rooms. She must have a reason." She leaned closer. "We need help. I think Isaiah can get us evidence. His sister is in that place." "A slave?" Beatrice whispered in disbelief. "Mother will kill you both." "He's not like the others," Josephine said. "He came here for a reason, to find her. And tonight, while Mother's distracted, he's going to try." A board creaked in the hallway. The sisters froze, holding their breath. Footsteps passed, then faded. "We must be careful," Beatrice whispered. "Caroline watches everything. So does Agatha, the head servant. She tells Mother everything." "Phyllis is helping us," Josephine said quietly. "Not everyone in this house serves willingly." She turned to the window, watching the rain. "Bee, have you ever wondered about us? About our births?" "What do you mean?" Beatrice asked softly. "Mother bore us herself." "Did she?" Josephine whispered. "I found Father's old notes. He wrote about surrogates. Women used to carry his children. Bee, what if we were part of the experiment too?" The words hung in the air, terrible and heavy. Beatrice stared at her, unable to speak. If it were true, their whole lives were built on lies, on a bloodline designed in cruelty. A soft knock came at the door. It was the signal Phyllis used. Josephine opened it slightly, only to find Isaiah standing there, drenched and trembling. "Miss Josephine," he whispered urgently, "your mother's taking the lieutenant to the infirmary now. I need your help to reach my sister." Josephine turned to Beatrice, who nodded faintly. "Then you must help us too," she said. "You must show us proof of what happens there." "There's more," Isaiah said in a low, strained voice. "I found a hidden room beneath the infirmary, shelves of jars, infants, records with your family's names." Beatrice gasped, covering her mouth. Josephine steadied herself. "Show us," she said quietly. "Show us everything." The three of them, mistress, sister, and slave, stepped into the storm together, bound by terror and truth. In the hallway behind them, Caroline watched from the shadows, her face unreadable. In her hand, she held the pistol their father had once given her, the same weapon she had used to end his life when he tried to reveal the truth of their family's crimes. She had made her choice long ago, to stand with her mother's vision, no matter the cost. Outside, the storm raged. The gardens turned to rivers of mud. Lightning split the sky as the three figures moved through the darkness toward the wash house, a silent alliance walking the edge between life and damnation. The entrance to the tunnel lay beneath the great copper tubs. Josephine clutched her journal close to her chest, its pages wrapped in oilcloth. Beatrice's thin nightdress clung to her body, feet bare and cold. Neither sister had ever stepped into the night unchaperoned. But that night, all rules were broken. The rain poured harder, thunder echoing like a warning from heaven itself. Ahead, the wash house loomed, low and solid against the storm. They would enter the passage, face what waited beneath, and uncover the truth that would haunt the Tain name forever. The midnight walk through storm and secrecy was their first true act of defiance. They moved swiftly under the whipping rain and reached the old wash-house unseen. Inside, Isaiah went to work with quiet precision, pushing aside a heavy copper tub to uncover a trapdoor set deep in the stone floor. The hinges creaked in protest as he lifted it, revealing a narrow flight of steps sinking into blackness. "How did you find out about this?" Josephine asked, raising her voice over the pounding rain. "Phyllis told me," Isaiah answered. "She's been here 40 years. She knows every hidden path built for the servants to move unseen." Beatrice leaned forward, staring into the pit. "We'll need light." Nissa pulled a small tin lantern from her cloak and struck a match with trembling fingers. The tiny flame trembled, casting an eerie glow across their faces as they began to descend. The tunnel was sturdier than expected, lined with brick and packed dirt beneath their feet. It ran straight for about 50 yards before dividing into 2 passages. "The right one leads to the infirmary," Isaiah said. "The left? I'm not sure." Josephine hesitated only briefly. "We'll take the left first. If it connects to Mother's secret room, it might hold the proof we've been searching for." The left passage stretched 20 yards before ending at a thick oak door banded with iron. A heavy padlock sealed it shut. "We'll never break that," Beatrice whispered. Josephine drew out a ring of keys she'd taken from her mother's study the week before. "I've been waiting for the right time." The third key turned, and the lock clicked open, the sound unnervingly loud in the confined space. Isaiah pushed the door wide and raised the lantern. Inside was a small chamber, organized with disturbing care. Cabinets with glass fronts lined the walls, each holding rows of specimen jars. A wide desk stood at the center, cluttered with ledgers, glass tubes, and strange instruments. The air smelled of chemicals and something cloyingly sweet that made their throats tighten. Beatrice stumbled back, a sound between a prayer and a cry escaping her. "Oh God," she whispered. Inside each jar floated a tiny preserved human fetus at different stages of growth. Every jar bore neat labels listing parentage, gestation, and cause of termination. Some noted removal when defects were suspected or traits deemed undesirable. Josephine's hand shook as she flipped open a leather-bound journal on the desk. "These are Dr. Parnell's notes," she breathed. "He's been experimenting with selective breeding, using the enslaved as subjects." Isaiah held the lantern closer, scanning the cabinets. "These records go back 20 years, he murmured. Josephine froze. That means it began with Father's work, before Mother took control. But she must have turned it into a system after he died. She turned more pages until one entry made her stop cold. "Isaiah, these aren't all from enslaved women." She pointed at pages marked with the family crest. "These show surrogates carrying children fathered by chosen men, children raised as part of the family." Realization dawned. "Caroline was part of it all along," Josephine whispered. "She's known from the beginning." "But why?" Beatrice asked, horror twisting her features. "What is the point of all this?" Before Josephine could answer, voices echoed faintly from the right-hand passage, the direction of the infirmary. Elenena's sharp tones were unmistakable, followed by a man's deeper reply. "Lieutenant Blackwood," Isaiah hissed. "They're coming. We have to hide." He snuffed the lantern, plunging them into near darkness. "No," Josephine said, her voice steady despite the fear. "This ends tonight. I'm taking these records. They're evidence no court in Charleston can ignore." She began cramming ledgers and journals into a canvas sack. Isaiah moved to the trap door. "We need to reach the infirmary first. My sister's still there, and your mother's bringing Blackwood with her." Josephine nodded. "Beatrice, take these. Hide them under my floorboards. If we're not back by dawn, bring them to Judge Holloway in Charleston. Only him. Understand?" Beatrice hesitated, then pulled the sack beneath her cloak and slipped away through the tunnel. Josephine and Isaiah turned back to the fork, taking the right-hand passage this time. Voices grew louder as they crept forward, pressing into the shadows where lamplight spilled through a half-open door. "The breeding program produces about 30 infants each year," said one voice, calm as if discussing crops. The other answered in the same indifferent tone. "Excellent results." The three, two sisters and a young man desperate to save his kin, stood silent, realizing how deep the secret ran and how close they were to being discovered. "With careful selection, we've increased birth weight by 12% and reduced infant deaths below 5, came Elelanina's proud voice. "Remarkable," said Blackwood flatly. "And these women, most are enslaved?" "Yes. Some are of mixed heritage, carefully chosen for balance. The key is precise record-keeping and controlled breeding." Isaiah's face contorted with rage, but Josephine gripped his arm. "Not yet," she whispered. They needed undeniable proof. "Do you think this could be expanded?" Blackwood asked coolly. "Certainly," Elelanena said. "Imagine plantations across the South not just producing cotton, but generations of humans bred for strength, obedience, endurance, even intellect. The economic possibilities are endless." "And your daughters?" Blackwood's voice sharpened. "They agree with this?" A pause followed. "Caroline embraces the vision. Josephine has potential, but she's hesitant. As for Beatrice, she comes of age next month. Her first pairing is already arranged." "With whom?" Blackwood asked. "Why, with you, Lieutenant," Elelanena said with a cold laugh. "Your bloodline, discipline, and intellect make you ideal. You'll be compensated generously. Your brother Thomas will be paired with Caroline." In the shadows, Josephine gasped, and Isaiah's hand went to the knife at his belt, but she stopped him again. They needed witnesses, not vengeance. "Yet." "I see," Blackwood said after a moment. "And Dr. Parnell handles the medical work?" "Yes. His studies in heredity are decades ahead of Europe. Together we are shaping the future of human cultivation." As Elelanena continued her chilling monologue, Isaiah and Josephine edged the door wider, glimpsing her and Blackwood near the infirmary corridor. Dr. Parnell stood beside them, reading from a clipboard as women lay behind glass panes in the patient rooms. "My sister," Isaiah whispered. "She's in recovery. The third door to the right. That's what Phyllis said." Josephine nodded. "We need a distraction." Before they could act, the main door burst open. Caroline Tane stood there, soaked by rain, her father's pistol clenched in one trembling hand. "Mother," she cried, "Josephine and Beatrice are gone, and I found this in the tunnel." She held up Josephine's journal, pages fluttering in the draft. "They know everything. They plan to expose us." Elelenena's face turned to stone. "Find them," she ordered. "Search every building, every field. They cannot leave the plantation." In the tunnel, Josephine and Isaiah exchanged grim looks. Stealth was no longer an option. Their only chance was to reach Ruth and flee before the estate claimed more lives. Blackwood had seen cruelty before, on the frontier, in ruined villages, among the wreckage of war. But nothing compared to the cold, deliberate evil of Elelanena Tyne's operation. As Caroline's alarm spread through the infirmary, Blackwood used the confusion to step aside, his hand brushing the inside pocket of his coat. There, folded neatly, were his official papers, not only his commission as a lieutenant, but credentials marking him as a federal investigator sent from Washington after reports of human breeding on southern estates. "Mrs. Tane," he said evenly, "perhaps your daughters merely went for a walk." "Do not patronize me," Elelanena snapped. "Caroline, alert the overseers. Question everyone. Parnell, secure the records and prepare to relocate the subjects if necessary." As Caroline hurried out into the storm, Blackwood noticed movement down the far corridor, a door opening slightly, a familiar face glimpsed in the dim light. The new house servant, the one who had watched so carefully at dinner. Dr. Parnell. Elelanena continued, unaware of what Blackwood had seen. "Show the lieutenant your laboratory while I oversee the search." "Of course." Parnell said smoothly. "This way, sir. I believe you'll find our procedures fascinating." Blackwood followed down a narrow stairway, every step calculated. His mission had been to observe quietly and return later with marshals, but the situation had changed. The Taine daughters were in peril, and the hunt had begun. "Our methods follow the same logic used in livestock breeding," Parnell explained as they descended. "We've simply refined it for human application." "And you have proof of success?" Blackwood asked, voice calm. 20 years of records," Parnell said proudly. "Multiple generations. We've demonstrated that traits can be enhanced through selective pairing." His tone was detached, as if discussing crops rather than people. At the bottom, they stopped before a thick wooden door. Parnell produced a key, hesitated, and studied Blackwood's face. "You seem uneasy, Lieutenant. Having doubts about Mrs. Taine's vision?" Blackwood kept his composure. "Only trying to understand the full scope of it. It's far more extensive than I'd imagined." Satisfied, Parnell nodded and turned the key. "Then you'll appreciate this," he said. "Here we keep the records and the specimens. You'll understand the scientific importance once you—" He stopped abruptly, staring at the chaos before him. "Someone's been here," he gasped. "The records, some of them are gone." Blackwood stepped up behind Parnell, scanning the room. Drawers yanked open, papers scattered, the desk stripped bare. "Maybe Mrs. Taine moved them already," he offered, though his tone carried doubt. "No," Parnell said firmly. "This isn't how I left it this afternoon." He darted among the specimen jars, squinting at their faded labels. "The Taine lineage files are missing, and the breeding projections for the next generation." Blackwood seized the opportunity. "Doctor, we should head back upstairs. There may have been a breach of security." A sharp, piercing scream shattered the air above them. Parnell's head snapped upward. "That came from the recovery ward." Both men bolted up the stairs, Blackwood keeping a deliberate pace a step behind. The main corridor had dissolved into chaos. 2 enslaved women had broken free from their rooms, wrestling with Nurse Hammond. At the far end, Elena shouted commands to house servants hastily called from the mansion. Amid the uproar, Blackwood's keen eyes caught sight of Isaiah, the same enslaved man he had noticed earlier, ushering a young woman and what appeared to be Josephine Taine toward a side door. The other Taine daughter was nowhere in sight. Blackwood acted without hesitation. From inside his coat, he drew not a pistol, but a small whistle. Standard army issue, its shrill tone designed to slice through any noise. He blew 3 sharp blasts. The signal was clear. Federal marshals stationed around the plantation would move in. The sound cut through the bedlam like a blade. Elena turned sharply, her confusion curdling into fury as she realized what it meant. "You!" she spat. "You're no breeder." "Federal investigator," Blackwood replied, showing his credentials. "This operation is over, Mrs. Taine." Elena laughed, a thin, brittle laugh edged with menace. "You fool! Do you think I haven't protected myself? Half of Charleston's courts profit from my work. The governor himself supports our expansion." "Perhaps," Blackwood said coolly, "but I answer to Washington, not Charleston. Ending illegal slave trading in places like this is now a federal priority." Parnell began edging away, his eyes darting for an escape route. Blackwood kept him in his peripheral vision, addressing Elena again. "The only question now," he said evenly, "is whether you'll face justice alone or drag your powerful allies down with you." Her expression didn't flicker. No fear, no denial. Instead, a small cold smile touched her lips. "Lieutenant, your federal reach ends at these gates. My overseers are armed, loyal, and well paid. Your marshals may never even reach this door." She turned and shouted, "Mr. Webb, we have an intruder." From a side hallway, Silas Webb emerged, the overseer, flanked by 2 men holding shotguns. Their faces showed they'd be glad for a reason to use them. The tense standoff broke when Caroline appeared, her dress soaked with mud, a pistol clutched in one hand. "Mother," she cried. Josephine and that new house slave tried to escape through the north fields with one of the breeding women. Elena's attention snapped to the windows. "Stop them at all costs," she barked. "The documents they've taken—" At that same moment, below the house, two figures crouched in darkness. Josephine clutched her journal to her chest, its pages damp with sweat. Isaiah pressed a finger to his lips, listening. Above them echoed hurried footsteps and shouted orders. Doors slammed, boots thudded. Outside, rain pounded against the shutters as the storm raged on, wind howling through the trees. The plantation, once a model of control and routine, had dissolved into panic. They crept forward through the low tunnel, the damp earth cool against their faces. Josephine's mind raced. Ruth, she was their hope. Ruth knew the marshal's patrol times and had promised to wait by the old ash tree near the north fence if everything fell apart. If they could reach her, they might still make it to the back roads and vanish. But the papers, those critical records Parnell had mentioned, couldn't be left behind. They were proof of the whole horror. Lineage charts, selective breeding notes, and financial ledgers showing the profit made from each human life. If Elena recovered them, every effort to stop her would collapse. Above, someone cursed. Heavy boots clattered closer. Josephine flattened herself against the ground as Isaiah covered her with his body. The entrance pipe they had used was now buried beneath a layer of dirt, but it wouldn't fool the searchers for long. A voice shouted orders. Another answered. The boots passed so near Josephine could hear the scrape of soles on wood and the faint clink of metal. Time stretched thin, fragile as the skin on water. One wrong sound, one careless breath, and they would be discovered. Isaiah acted quickly, without a word. Slipping from the tunnel's mouth, he loosened the iron grate that opened into a drainage channel leading toward the ash tree. The passage beyond was narrow but open. He gestured silently for Josephine to follow. She clutched her journal tight and crawled after him, her limbs trembling with cold and fear. The tunnel dipped, the roof slick with moss and dripping water. Every inch forward felt like stealing a heartbeat back from the grave. Finally, they emerged near the edge of the north field. The storm had quieted to a fine mist. The ash tree stood alone against a bruised gray sky, its branches tossing wildly in the wind. Ruth was there, waiting, wrapped in a rough coat, her face tense and alert. Behind her, two riders adjusted their saddles, ready to move. "The marshals are still signaling," Ruth whispered quickly, handing Josephine a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. "This is what you took from the lab. Keep it safe. Get it out of the state. I'll go back and lead them off." Josephine shook her head. "I can't leave without my sister, not without Beatrice." Ruth's jaw clenched. "Then help me draw them away. Together we can divide the search." Isaiah gave a sharp nod. There was no time to argue. They mounted the horses and rode hard through the mud, rain blurring the world into a smear of gray and silver. Behind them, angry shouts rose as the plantation's overseers gave chase. For now, the papers were safe, but the night storm would test every ounce of their strength. Then, in one breathless moment, Josephine surged forward, her soaked dress clinging to her legs as she lunged at Webb. The surprise of her attack threw him backward, his pistol swinging wildly. The baby cried out, but Ruth caught him up, shielding him with her arms. Isaiah used the distraction to throw the second overseer to the ground, pinning him until the fight left his body. Moses, the ferryman, stood firm at the river's edge, his gaff hook raised, eyes blazing. With a quick command, he drove the attackers back toward the shallow water, forcing them away without striking. Webb cursed loudly, rage twisting his face, but surrounded by Josephine, Isaiah, Ruth, and Moses. He hesitated, his moment of power gone. Blackwood galloped up on horseback, positioning himself between them and the rest of the overseers. "Move, now!" he shouted, his voice ringing clear above the drizzle. Ruth clutched the baby tighter as Isaiah lifted her onto the ferry. Josephine followed close behind, one hand clutching the rope ladder Moses had dropped, the other protecting the precious documents. They scrambled aboard, hearts pounding as water slapped against the hull. Webb raised his pistol again, but before he could fire, Blackwood's revolver cracked. The bullet struck the dock beside Webb's boot, splintering the wood. Webb froze, realization dawning in his eyes. Seeing their leader falter, the other men slowly lowered their weapons. Josephine's chest heaved as relief mixed with exhaustion. Moses pushed the ferry off from the dock, and the flat-bottomed boat caught the swollen current. The river was wild, but the vessel held steady. Josephine knelt beside Ruth, wrapping the baby in her damp shawl. Isaiah stood watch, his eyes fixed on the shadowed far bank where dawn was breaking in faint streaks of light. "Are we safe?" Ruth whispered, voice trembling. "For now," Josephine answered, glancing back toward the dark shape of the plantation fading behind them. "But we're not free yet. Not until we reach the northern banks. Every minute matters." Blackwood rode alongside in the shallows, scanning the terrain. The marshes ahead offered concealment, but danger lurked behind every bend. "We'll move upriver," he said. "There's a shallow crossing about a mile ahead. We can make it unseen." Josephine handed him a small gold locket and part of the bundle of documents. "Keep these safe," she said quietly. "They prove everything. If we live through this, they'll destroy her." Blackwood nodded solemnly, tucking them into his coat as the ferry picked up speed. The first pale rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, glinting off the swollen water. Around them, the world seemed to hold its breath. The storm spent, but its echoes still rumbling in the distance. Behind them lay the wreck of the Tain estate. Ahead, the uncertain road to freedom.